Hello. The Pirate season is over. They finished 76 and 86, which is the exact same record they had in 2023. So I figured I'd go over the season a little bit, see what went wrong, what maybe went right, and relitigate a lot of the things that have aggravated many a Pirates fan over the last 6 months. For context, if you remember before the season, I predicted the team would finish with a record of 79 and 83, which would have been a 3-game improvement over 2023, which at the time I was saying wasn't good enough. They, coming out of 2023, they had an opportunity. They had a fair amount of talent that if you made significant additions in the offseason last winter, could have propelled the team to possibly making the season this year. And obviously that didn't happen. And in fact, not only did they not even reach that modest improvement that I was predicting, they didn't improve whatsoever. Many people will point to the 10-game losing streak that they had shortly after the trade deadline as a big reason for their failure. And that's fair. Keep in mind, take out those 10 games. They finished 10 games under 500. Take out those 10 games, they were 500 the rest of the year. And I say that meaning that's not necessarily good. That's winning as many as you lose. If you took those 10 games and instead of making them 0-10 in those games, you made them 10-0, they still wouldn't have made the playoffs. They would have finished 86 and 76, which would have been, I believe, 3 games out of the playoffs. So they were far away from being a playoff team. And really, even if you take out that, what some would call an outlier performance, they still weren't in a position to make the playoffs, and they were barely a 500 team. But they were exactly a 500 team, aside from those 10 games. So the failures of the Pirates this year are more than just a 10-game stretch. But I think it's interesting because if you look at what and the conventional wisdom for most people entering the season was, this team, it was their hitting is going to be good, their starting pitching is going to be questionable, but the relief pitching is going to be generally steady. And honestly, the reason they had a poor record this year was not really because of those things. Instead of being good, their hitting was kind of bad. Their OPS as a team was 672, which was 27th out of 30 MLB teams. Their pitching, which I said, and most people predicted was going to be slightly below, predicted to be pretty bad, was still below average, but not as awful as their hitting was. Their ERA as a team was 4.15, which ranked 20th out of 30. That's the combined ERA, that's their total ERA, so that's including both starting pitching and relieving. And honestly, yeah, if you want to talk about the team as a whole, I think it is important to kind of break it up into hitting, relief pitching, and starting pitching, those last two things separately. And honestly, let's look at their starting pitching. That was a mixed bag. I said before the season, I said going into last offseason, especially with Johan Oviedo going down with an injury, we knew he was going to miss the entire season, you needed to acquire at least 2 starting pitchers, and I was kind of hoping for 3. They did acquire 2, but neither of them going into the season were guys that I was that happy about. They acquired Martin Perez and Marco Gonzalez. Perez, coming into the season, had 1 good season in his last 10 years. Gonzalez had spent the majority of the last half decade or so getting injured every year and not pitching a whole lot. And both of those traits that both those guys had throughout their career happened in 2024. Perez pitched 16 games for the Pirates before being traded at the trade deadline, had a 5.20 ERA. He wasn't good, just like he was for all but 1 year in the last decade. Marco Gonzalez, the guy who had spent most of his career being injured, pitched all of 7 games with the Pirates. He pitched a little bit in April, got injured, was on the IL for a couple months, came back, got injured again. He had a 4.54 ERA in 7 starts, only pitched 33 2/3 innings. So there's 2 acquisitions they made in a position that we were all saying you need to improve, did not really provide much value overall to the team. And so then, but the thing is, despite that, their starting pitching wasn't really a weakness. Their starting pitching I don't think their starting pitching was as amazing as people want to claim it was. But it wasn't really a weakness. The problem is you have a couple of young pitchers that started strong and ended poorly. And when I say the young pitchers, I'm talking about Mitch Keller and Jared Jones. Jared Jones finished with a 4.14 ERA in 22 starts. Mitch Keller finished with a 4.25 ERA in 31 starts. The 31 starts led the team. And the thing with Keller is that continues a trend where it seems like he keeps fading at the end of the season, which isn't great. They did sign him to an extension, so back in, I believe it was April. So maybe, maybe he'll figure it out. He's got some time to figure it out. But yeah, Jones started out very well, and he was highly touted, and he was on the starting rotation to start the year. But after he got injured, he wasn't as the same pitcher that he was before it. But obviously, when you talk about starting pitching with the Pirates, the headliner is Paul Skeens, 11-3 with a 1.96 ERA and a 2.40 or a 0.95 WHIP. Has already won I believe it was the Baseball America and Rookie of the Year award. And people are hoping that he'll win the bigger Baseball Writers Association of America, I believe is the other one. The one everybody cares about. We already know he won the one NL Rookie of the Year award, and the hope is that he's going to win the one everybody cares about. And he would deserve it. Can't say enough about how good Paul Skeens was, but the important thing that I stress to people is just because Paul Skeens is there doesn't mean that the Pirates are a good team, because starting pitcher can only impact 20% of your games. Paul Skeens is not playing the other 84 nights out of 5. But you couldn't have asked for much more from Paul Skeens after he debuted for the Pirates in mid-May. And I should, when I'm speaking about starting pitching, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Luis Ortiz, who started in the bullpen, but ended up in the starting rotation after various injuries and whatnot, and had a good year, 7-6 with a 3.32 ERA and a 1.11 WHIP. Love to see that. Hopefully he can continue that into next year. And another guy that did all right, that a lot of people weren't expecting, Bailey Falter won the spot in the starting rotation out of spring training, and he got booed at the home opener. And honestly, he put together decent fifth starter numbers, 8-9 with a 4.43 ERA and a 1.29 WHIP. I mean, he's not an all-star, but he did a hell of a lot better than Martin Perez did, and you can't ask for a whole lot, more than that from a fifth starter. So can't complain about Bailey Falter. But overall, that rotation was okay. They weren't. The rotation was not the reason this team did poorly this year. I'll put it that way. Going into the year, that would have been what I expected to happen, would be that the rotation would be a reason they would fail. And honestly, they had some poor performances, but honestly, most nights it was other stuff that was going wrong that was causing the Pirates to lose. Over the course of the season, the hitting, like I pointed out, that 672 OPS, 27th in all baseball, that reared its ugly head. This team had a couple decent hitters in Brian Reynolds, who finished with a 791 OPS, 24 home runs. I mean, still, it's not an 800 OPS, though. Like, this team didn't, and then as I'm looking at this, they didn't have one, even in a minimum of at bats, they didn't have one player with an OPS over 800. Jesus Christ. Your highest OPS, of anybody. Well, we won very close. Was Joey Bart, who's played in 80 games with 799 OPS. That was, you could argue, he's been one of Ben Cherington's few really, really, one of his best pickups, honestly. He was picked up, I can't remember off the top of my head. I want to say it was about either May or June, and couldn't ask for much more than him. Catcher hits 13 home runs, take that every day. That's good to see, especially after Henry Davis came out and did absolutely nothing. Henry Davis finished in 37 games with a 144 batting average, 453 OPS. And you're really wondering if that was a complete waste for the first overall pick, because he has done absolutely nothing in the major leagues thus far. Your other catcher that the Pirates acquired over the offseason was Yasmani Grandal, who spent most of the season doing absolutely nothing, but then had a really good August and September to finish with numbers that aren't awful. His OPS was 704, 228 average, 9 home runs in 72 games. I mean, those aren't bad numbers for a catcher. Problem is just he had a batting average over 200 coming into August. And so they spent a lot of the year playing a guy that wasn't doing anything for them. Speaking of a person kind of like that is Rowdy Tellez, who fans wanted DFA'd in early June when he was hitting under 200. But then starting in June, he became one of the best players in baseball. For a period of June and July, he was hitting 340-something with a 900-something OPS. And honestly, by the end of the season, he was not really a problem. He finished with a 691 OPS, 13 home runs in 131 games. DFA'd with 5 games left in the season. That's a whole other thing that honestly I could talk about for 20 minutes. We don't have the time. O'Neal Cruz, in his first full season as in the major leagues, had a decent year. 21 home runs, 773 OPS. If he's going to be the cornerstone of your franchise, though, you do want an OPS over 800. And they're moving him to center field, which might be better just because his defense at shortstop leaves a lot to be desired. I believe it was about 22 or 23 errors he had there. But and Michael A. Taylor, though, one of the big offseason acquisitions, did absolutely nothing. 5 home runs, 193 average, 543 OPS. Edward Olivares, same thing. Before he got I don't know if he was DFA, but he was like, he was no longer in the majors in the second half of the year. 55 games with a 624 OPS. Those are some of the guys that, and also Connor Joe did the same thing he did last year, which was have a really good April and May and do absolutely nothing the rest of the year. Connor Joe finished with a 688 OPS. You can't have that many guys in your lineup. Oh, and Ke'Bryan Hayes took a massive step back. He was injured again at the end of the year, but 96 games, a 573 OPS. You can't keep having guys in your lineup that can't hit. That's going to be a big problem. And that was the big problem for the first few months of the year. The main problem, the reason the Pirates couldn't get more than a couple games over 500 was because they kept having losing games 3-1 or 2-0 because they were getting good starting pitching performances and getting absolutely nothing out of their hitters. But for a while, that was keeping them. And Andrew McCutchen, by the way, had one of his best years. He had a better year than he did last year. I think his average went down a little bit, but he had a lot more home runs. 20 home runs in 120 games, 739 OPS. He's getting old, and he's not the same Andrew McCutchen that you had 10 years ago, but can't complain about him this year. The big thing that tanked the Pirates season, or that made it, took them, they were in contention at the trade deadline, but after that 10-game losing streak at the beginning of August, that took them out of contention. And taking a look at that is, it's kind of hard to kind of evaluate that because the performances from some of these players were so uneven. Colin Holderman was one of the best relievers in all of baseball in the first 3 months of the year. And then he single-handedly lost you 2 or 3 games in early August. David Bednar was kind of bad in April and May, good in June and July. Or actually, he was bad in April, good in May, June, and July, bad in August, and May and September. Like, what do you take out of that? It's not reliable, but that's the reason why him and Holderman were the reason that the team. I think I look back into that 10-game losing streak. There were 5 games that, because of relievers, caused a direct reason for them losing those games. And if you stay afloat, go 5-5 in that stretch, maybe you play better down the stretch after that. Who knows? But those relief pitching performances really hurt the team, completely squashed their momentum. Then the one guy who was kind of uneven, but Aroldis Chapman did what he has done for the last few years. It was he strikes out a lot of guys, also walks a lot of guys. And it's like, what do you do with that? 3.79 ERA, which is good for a reliever, not amazing for a reliever. They're kind of held to a higher standard. But when Bednar was clearly struggling by the end of the year, Chapman took over the closer role and finished with 14 saves. But again, there were parts of the season, though, where Chapman also was unreliable because he was walking so many people. And it's just like Majinski finished his season by having a poor outing in New York, a game I went to on Sunday against the Yankees. Just looking at other guys, I'm just looking at this roster. I forgot about Roansy Contreras. They got rid of Roansy Contreras because he started the year and was not doing well. 4.41 ERA in 16 and a third innings. I don't know. I think they gave up on him a little early, but I don't know. So anyway, the take-home away from this team is this is year 5 of the Ben Cherington and Derek Shelton era, and they did not improve their record. The reinforcements that are coming from the minor leagues do not appear to be making that huge of a difference. Nick Gonzalez, people tout as being, look at how great he's been. And it's like, well, he had a 270 average. It's not bad, but 709 OPS, 7 home runs in 94 games. That's not bad, but if that's all you have to hang your hat on, that kind of says a lot more about the low ceiling among Pirates prospects. Henry Davis failing has been a big problem. Andy Rodriguez should be back next year, but today it was pretty much revealed that Derek Shelton and Ben Cherington will be back in 2025. I'm against that. In year 5 of Neil Huntington's tenure, they were clearly on an upward trajectory. They had their collapses in 2011 and 2012, but their record still improved up from every year from 2010 through 2012. They improved their number of wins from 2011 to 2012 by 7 wins. So through 5 years, even though he had 5 losing seasons, it looked like they were going up. But here in 2024, after Cherington and Shelton's 5th year, they've stalled. And it's like, where is the improvement going to come next year? I don't know. They'll use their same line of, oh, improvement needs to come internally. And it's just like, that just reads to me like we don't plan on doing anything. So at this moment, I am not optimistic about their chances in 2025. Maybe Ben Cherington will decide to get off his ass and do a hell of a lot more this offseason than he did last offseason. But I'm not holding my breath on that because they needed to specifically do things last offseason, and what they got was the exact same record that they had the year before. Anyway, that's a look back at the 76 and 86 2024 Pittsburgh Pirates. Hopefully 2025 is a hell of a lot better. I'm not holding my breath.